The cake hadn't even been cut yet when my sister hurled it straight at my face. The frosting smeared across my cheek like a declaration of war. Gasps ricocheted around the glass-walled greenhouse. Some froze, some laughed nervously. But no one, not even my mother, said a word. I stood there, motionless, the scent of lemon lavender filling my nose as buttercream dripped onto my silk dress. Clara stood smugly across from me, arms crossed, her champagne flute still half full. "There," she said, loud enough for every guest to hear. "That's what entitlement tastes like." She looked right at me. "You think the land is yours? Wake up. You always got more than you deserved." My hands trembled, not from shock, but from the clarity of the moment. The betrayal wasn't new. The silence of my parents wasn't new. But this public stage, the audience of friends, co-workers, mentors, this was new. I looked toward the corner of the room where Daniel, my fiancé, was already moving toward me. But before he could say a word, a second voice cut through the room. "Excuse me. My name is Arlo Benson. I represent the Rhodes estate, and I believe there's been a misunderstanding." All heads turned, Clara's smile cracked, and I smiled for the first time that day. Because unlike frosting, legal ownership doesn't smear so easily. My name is Madeline Rhodes. I'm 34 years old, a florist by trade, a survivor by practice. I wasn't born invisible. I was made that way by 1,000 quiet dismissals that stacked themselves into a wall. We grew up in a pale blue house at the edge of Ashland, Oregon. Mom taught piano part-time. Dad handled permits for a lumber company. And Clara performed. In every room, at every age, with every excuse. She failed 3 colleges and still got applause. I built a profitable wedding business from nothing, and they called me obsessed. When I got engaged to Daniel, kind, steady, brilliant with silence, my parents blinked, congratulated him, then asked Clara if she'd eaten. But the one thing I had, the one thread that tethered me to any hope of fairness, was the promise my grandfather made before he passed. "Use the land," he said, handing me a hand-drawn map of the old orchard lot. "You're the only one who plants things that grow." It wasn't much, just 2 acres of dry, stubborn earth on the outskirts of Phoenix, Oregon, but to me it was everything. A place to build our future, a studio, a home. Maybe a child's laughter one day. My parents didn't argue. They didn't hug me either. They just said, "Do what you want, Madeline, you always do." I took that as approval, naively. For the first time in years, I let myself believe. Believe that maybe Clara had turned a corner. She called me 3 weeks before the bridal shower, her voice unusually sincere. "Let me plan it, Mads," she said. "Let me give you one good memory before you become someone's wife." I should have known better, but something about the way she said "good memory," like it was something rare, like it mattered. It cracked open the door just enough for hope to slip in. So I let her. I let her choose the venue, Aunt Cecile's greenhouse, where I had helped transplant orchids as a kid. I let her pick the menu. I even let her invite a few of her own friends. Daniel was skeptical. But I smiled and said, maybe this is what healing looks like, messy, but trying. In the days leading up to the party, I kept catching little signals. Clara sent me a sample menu, asked for my flower preferences, even offered to pay for the cake. I told myself it wasn't manipulation. It was effort. It was growth. And when the invitations went out and people RSVP'd, yes, from all parts of my life, college roommates, old clients, even my favorite librarian from when I was 10. I felt seen. For once, I was Madeline the burden. I was Madeline the bride, the woman who had built a life from petals and quiet resilience. Even my mom texted a simple, "Looking forward to it." No exclamation mark, no emoji. But for her, that was practically a love letter. I spent the night before the shower arranging the place cards by hand. One for Clara, one for my mother, one for my father, even though I knew he wouldn't say a word. It didn't matter. I just wanted everyone to see me, really see me for once. But some people only show up when they know they can steal the spotlight. And others, they show up just to blow out your candles. The greenhouse shimmered in the afternoon sun. Vines curled around the glass rafters, and warm light spilled over the long table draped in linen and fresh eucalyptus. The air smelled like lemon cake and wild mint. It was beautiful. And for the first 20 minutes, it felt almost normal. Guests mingled. Daniel smiled. Even my mom in her beige silk blouse managed a compliment. The arrangement's not bad. Then Clara stood up. She tapped her fork against a wine glass and cleared her throat with dramatic precision, like she was preparing to deliver a TED Talk, not a toast. "Hi, everyone," she began. "Thanks for being here to celebrate my sister. It's not every day Madeline lets people into her perfect little life." Polite chuckles. I forced a smile. She raised her glass. "To the girl who turned petals into profit and kept the rest of us at arm's length while doing it." More laughter. Some guests weren't sure if it was a roast or a tribute. Then her voice shifted, lower, more deliberate. "And since we're all here, I thought now's a good time to share something special. A family update." My stomach turned. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased like it had been handled too many times. "As of last week," Clara said, unfolding it slowly, "the Rhodes property in Phoenix, the orchard land Madeline S. been talking about, has been officially transferred into my name." The air left the room like someone had pulled a plug from the floor. Mom and Dad just felt it was more fair this way. After all, I'm the one still finding my path. Maddie has Daniel, a house, a business. And she's always been the resourceful one. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. It wasn't the words. It was the casual delivery, like she was reading the weather report. I looked toward my mother. She didn't blink. My father sipped his wine. No one stood up for me. I rose slowly, trying to keep my voice even. That land was promised to me. Granddad made it clear. There's even a map he gave me, hand-drawn, signed. Clara shrugged. Granddad's gone. And promises don't pay bills. Paperwork does. Then she reached for the cake, a lemon lavender three-tiered centerpiece. She lifted a chunk with her bare hand, frosting curling over her fingers. "Here, as your slice of entitlement," she spat, and flung it straight at my face. Gasps. A server dropped a tray. Someone said, "What the hell?" And still, no one moved. Not Mom, not Dad. Just Daniel, his chair scraping hard against the floor as he rushed to my side. But I was already standing still, chest heaving, jaw clenched, lemon frosting sliding down my cheek like an accusation. I wiped it away with one finger, looked Clara in the eye. "You just made your biggest mistake." She snorted. "Oh yeah, gonna sue me over cake." And that's when the man in the corner cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, stepping forward and holding up a folder, I'm Arlo Benson. I represent the Rhodes estate, and I believe Ms. Clara just publicly claimed a fraudulent transfer of property. Dead silence. We'd like to address that immediately. Clara's face dropped, and for the first time that day, I felt something break. But not in me, in them. I didn't cry that night. Not in the car, not in the shower. Not even when Daniel gently wiped a smear of frosting from my ear and whispered, "You didn't deserve any of that." Because I'd already cried too many times in places where no one noticed. In childhood bedrooms, behind bathroom doors, in the spaces between my mother's approval and my sister's chaos. No, I didn't cry. I called a lawyer. Arlo Benson wasn't new to me. He was the attorney who'd helped my grandfather draft his final affairs. The one who mailed me the map of the orchard lot 3 months after Granddad passed, with a note scribbled in blue ink. Build something that lasts. I told Arlo what happened. He listened in complete silence, then asked one question. Do you still have the original map? I did, framed in my closet. I'd never hung it up. It felt too personal. He came by the next morning with 2 folders, one stern brow and a quiet promise. We'll do this the right way, not for revenge, for restoration. Over the next few weeks, everything moved beneath the surface. While Clara posted filtered brunch photos and cryptic captions about betrayal by blood, Arlo and I combed through land records, traced notarized documents, and filed a quiet injunction to pause any transfer of ownership. Turned out my mother had never completed the legal reassignment. She just assumed I wouldn't fight. And that assumption was about to cost her everything she tried to take. I said nothing to the family. No calls, no replies. No passive-aggressive Facebook posts. Let them think I was licking wounds. In reality, I was sharpening arrows. Daniel stayed close but never pushed. One night, while folding save-the-date cards, he looked up and asked, "You sure you want to go through with the wedding while all this is happening?" I smiled. That's exactly why I'm going through with it. Because for once, I wasn't going to let my family rewrite the chapter they didn't like. This wedding wasn't just about me marrying Daniel. It was about claiming my life without permission. We hired extra security, rerouted access points, locked down guest lists like a state secret. And when the court finally set the preliminary hearing on the property dispute, it fell exactly 5 days before my wedding. Poetic, Arlo said, like watching weeds pulled up by the root right before planting season. I nodded, because I wasn't walking into that courthouse to argue. I was walking in to reclaim something that was mine. Not just the land, but the right to choose where I'd plant my next beginning. The morning of our wedding broke clean and bright. No clouds, no warnings, just a sky so blue it almost felt like a dare. Stonegrove Ranch was blooming. Lavender fields rippled in the wind and white chairs curved like a crescent around the altar. I arrived early, 3 hours early, not because I was nervous, but because I was ready. Not for the vows or the music, for the reckoning. Security swept the perimeter twice. Our coordinator triple-checked the list. Daniel, ever calm, rehearsed his lines one last time. Then, just before the guests began to arrive, I received a text from Arlo. They're here. Not in tuxedos, not with flowers, but with a manila folder, a legal bluff, and a face that didn't understand the war was already over. Clara showed up in white, not ivory, not cream, white. A floor-length dress with rhinestones and a veil twisted into a messy updo, like this was her day, not mine. My mother walked beside her, lips pressed so tight they looked drawn on. My father trailed behind, eyes low, as if even he couldn't look me in the face anymore. They didn't even get past the front gate. Arlo intercepted them before the valet could finish parking. Unless you're here to apologize, I'd suggest you go home. This property is secured, both physically and legally. Clara stepped forward, holding out a crumpled legal document. This injunction is temporary. I have a right to be here. That land is still in dispute. Arlo didn't raise his voice. He just handed her a glossy sheet of paper. Not a legal notice. A photo. A scanned image of my grandfather's handwritten letter, signed, notarized, and certified months before his passing. The one that read, "To Madeline, this land is yours because you build things that grow." And the world needs more of that. Clara went silent. My mother snatched the paper from her hand and scanned it, her jaw tightening with every word. This wasn't part of the probate. No, Arlo cut in, because it was filed separately, privately, with clear instructions. He turned to Clara. You didn't lose the land. You just never had it to begin with. Security escorted them back to their car. No shouting, no screaming. Just the quiet hum of defeat dragging behind a train of rhinestones. They didn't stay for the wedding. When I walked down the aisle, Uncle James, my mother's youngest brother, offered me his arm. He leaned in and whispered, "Your grandfather would have been proud." I smiled, not the shaky, grateful smile of someone seeking approval, but the calm, rooted smile of someone who no longer needed it. Daniel stood beneath the white wooden arch. His eyes were already glassy. We exchanged vows beneath garlands of wild aster and soft cottonwood. When I said, "I vow to never shrink for the comfort of others again." He squeezed my hand, so tight it almost hurt. The guests stood in applause, but inside I wasn't applauding. I was releasing every silenced protest, every room I was told to step out of, every table I was never invited to sit at. And as we walked down the aisle together, Daniel and I, hand in hand, I didn't look back once. They disappeared from my life without ceremony. No apology emails. No, we were wrong letters, just silence. Exactly the kind they'd once trained me to sit in without complaint. 3 weeks after the wedding, I heard from Aunt Cecile. "They lost the cottage in Medford," she said, barely above a whisper. Turns out Clara had taken out a private loan against the house to buy her future. But the future didn't want her back. Her fiancé, the one she'd paraded around as a tech investor, had vanished right after the wedding weekend. Turns out he was more dream than dollars. No income, no savings, just a rented Porsche and good lighting. My mother tried to cover Clara's debt. Sold off her piano, then her antique ring, then her name to shame. But it wasn't enough. The last I heard, they were renting a basement studio in Grants Pass. A 2-room walk-up with paper-thin walls and a landlord who didn't take calls after 5. And my father. He resurfaced the way fog does, quiet and soft, but still capable of obscuring everything. He sent a letter, handwritten, no return address, just 4 lines. I stayed silent because I thought it kept the peace. But silence is just cowardice in dress shoes. I'm sorry for what I allowed. If you ever want to talk, I'm listening now. I placed the letter in a drawer, beside my grandfather's map. Not because I forgave him, but because I wasn't angry anymore. Anger implies hope. And with them, I'd finally let hope go. The orchard land, mine now, uncontested, became more than property. It became sanctuary. We built the studio in spring. A greenhouse hybrid with hanging planters and a dried flower wall where women wrote the names of things they were finally ready to let die. Shame. Approval. Silence. Her name. Some wrote in ink. Some in pressed petals. One woman simply placed her wedding ring on the sill and walked out without a word. I didn't tell them my story. I didn't need to. They felt it in the soil, and that was enough. The day our daughter was born. The orchard bloomed 2 weeks early. Pale blossoms spilled across the branches like snow that had changed its mind. Daniel held her first, eyes full of tears, voice barely above a breath. Welcome home, Lily Rhodes. We named her after a flower that blooms quietly. That doesn't ask for attention, but still turns every head. At night, I'd walk her through the studio, barefoot on the cool concrete floor, whispering stories she couldn't yet understand. Stories not of pain, but of strength found in silence, of roots that grow deeper when no one's watching. I promised myself she'd never have to earn her place in a room I built. She'd never be told that strength means loneliness. She'd never be punished for thriving, and she'd never know love as something measured by usefulness. One spring morning, as the sun climbed over the cedar ridge, I stood on the edge of the orchard with Lily in my arms. She pointed to a bird, then to the sky, then to the soil. All of it was hers, not in ownership, but in belonging. Behind us, the wind moved through rows of wildflowers we hadn't planted, just appeared, like the land had finally exhaled. Daniel stepped beside me, coffee in hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Everything we'd fought for, every boundary drawn, every silence broken, every injustice exposed, was now growing beneath our feet. And as Lily reached for a falling petal, I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't always look like a reunion. Sometimes it looks like letting go of a weight so you can carry something lighter, like a child, or your own peace. I don't need them to say sorry anymore. I don't need them to see me. I see myself. And that's how I know I've won. Not with fists, not with courtrooms, but with lavender and lullabies and a door that no longer leads backward. If you've ever had to walk away from the ones who were supposed to protect you, not out of hate, but out of healing, you're not alone. Would you have chosen to forgive like I did, or would you have closed the door for good? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to follow this channel for more true stories about choosing peace, building freedom, and rewriting legacy on your own terms.